everyone. Thank you for tuning in for another episode of Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure. We are a weekly podcast dedicated to sincere, in-depth investigations into the paranormal, supernatural, and the metaphysical, with a special focus on the UFO topic. We take a sincere, analytical approach, thoroughly evaluating each case and its implications. Our discussions go beyond the surface as we engage with researchers, investigators, and experiencers to explore the deeper layers of their testimonies. We strive for high-resolution analysis, carefully examining evidence, patterns, and perspectives that challenge conventional thinking. If you're looking for a podcast that seeks deeper understanding, you're in the right place. Please be sure to like and subscribe and follow to receive notifications when new content is made available. You can also visit us at www.paranomalypodcast.com for more content and information, including all our social links. Thank you again for watching or listening, and we hope to see you on the next episode of Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure.
Okay, Hollywood, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Mm-hmm. So, first and foremost, did your parents intentionally name you Hollywood, California City, or was that just complete accident?
It was fully intentional. My mum's no longer with us, but until her dying day, she found it highly hilarious. But it's been helpful in my career. It's certainly memorable, and it's a name that I've grew into, perhaps.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So you were an experiencer, I think is the term you prefer, from England, from Liverpool, correct? Where the Beatles are from.
Yeah.
And you had a really kind of unique upbringing, I think, with your mother being, I think, a Wiccan. Did she practice Wiccan specifically?
She was very multifaceted and had her hands in lots of different occult, unseen, mystical, spiritual pots. So she was an interesting character, to say the least.
And you were just thoroughly steeped in metaphysical occult culture throughout your entire upbringing.
Yeah.
And we're from the get-go, and this is interesting, and I kind of want to maybe bring this up later, we're fully believing in magic and everything. And in fact, and we're going to get straight into this experience, when you first had an encounter with something anomalous, you didn't even think of it as anything odd at all. You know, you were just completely like, oh, you know, this is whatever, you know, these things exist.
Mm-hmm.
And I find that interesting. I think that opens up a lot of interesting questions, you know, because there's we'll get into this later, but, you know, the kind of understanding, and there's different schools of thought, that one of the biggest things holding us back, you know, from reaching our full potential as far as our abilities and so forth, psychic capacity, is that we're steeped in belief systems, you know, mainstream science, materialism, that ingrain in us that none of that is possible, you know, that kind of narrow our perception of the possible. So I'm kind of interested to ask you some questions about that later on, and so far as how maybe that has that kind of upbringing in terms of not having a narrowed perception of the possible, how that might have affected you. Anyway, let's get to I think you regard it as the first experience that you've had in your life when you were younger.
Yeah,
some kind of ritual.
Mm-hmm.
Give me the full breadth of detail.
The full shebang. We spent our summer holidays, our summer vacations schlepping around to ancient sites. You know, England is such an ancient place that we have so many to choose from, and that's how my late mum, you know, that's what we did. We went to ancient sites and we visited stone circles and what have you. And one particular summer, about 8 or 9, we typically, and I still do to this day, I've just booked to actually go back and do it. So, you know, strange. We typically would spend the summer solstice, which is a high holiday for some. We would spend summer solstice down in Wiltshire, which is, you know, anyone knows their sort of UAP law in England. It's a hotbed of activity and what have you. Anyway, so we'd gone to Wiltshire as normal to visit Stonehenge, the chalk horses, Avebury Stone Circle, and a detour to Glastonbury town. Mum was down there for some kind of ritual or some kind of something she was doing with a group of people.
Do you know have you ever gotten the real details as to what specifically she was doing?
No, I haven't, because we did so much of that. But interestingly, when she died, a group of people, very off-grid, unusual, peculiar folk, turned up at her funeral. We don't know how they knew. And they turned up and they lined the crematorium outside, and they turned up in like horses and traps, and, you know, very, very peculiar individuals. And they came to watch her come in, and then they left.
She was like a well-known psychic, I think you mentioned.
In some circles, yes.
Okay.
You know, but yeah, she was. People would call on our home from all over the world. But yeah, we were in Wiltshire. I remember we were staying, I think, on a New Age traveller site at the time, and we went up to the chalk horse. There's several etched into the hills around.
What is that exactly? So it's something that's etched into the stone on the hills. Is it like a petroglyph? Would you call it?
Very ancient. The very ancient. You know, I can't date them, but I probably should know that, but I don't. There's several chalk horses etched into the hills, and the hills in Salisbury are chalk underneath, so they were etched in. So we went to this particular horse, and her and her friends were kind of doing their thing, and myself and 2 other children had a, you know, can of soda and a packet of crisps, fried, as we call them here, packet of crisps and a can of pop soda. And we were just sat, you know, in the eye of this horse. The parents were doing what they were doing, which wasn't unusual for me to see. It just kind of was, you know, I'd seen it many times before. And then a small orange sun just kind of appeared in between me and these 2 other children. But these other children were also brought up like that. So there wasn't a shock. Oh, this is scary, crazy.
Wasn't even a shock to them either.
No.
In very close proximity, it appeared.
Like here.
Oh, really? So that close. And when you say sun, essentially just sun color, you know, sun, as far as the glow, the sort of character of the glow. And
if, you know, this was, you know, 30 plus years ago, but I recall it not glowing like a bright sun. It just had a glow to it, and it was just a bright orange small sun. And I just thought it was there because they were doing the magic stuff. It wasn't oh my God, like, what is this? We were just quite like, and kids we're so resilient, you know, children are very resilient, and we bounce. And I just kind of carried on with eating my packet of crisps and drinking my pop, and it wasn't like a big thing really. And then we carried on about our life, and we went down off the hill, and we carried on with whatever the grown-ups were doing, and the children were just taken along as part of the course. And I didn't even realize that was an experience until much, much, much later on in life, when I was able to kind of go back and realize and remember that I'd had these orange suns as a tapestry in my childhood. They would come often. It wasn't unusual. They would
come often.
Yeah, they would come often. They would come at times of transition. They would come happy emotive times. They would come often when mum was doing her thing. So I just thought it was all, I don't think I thought about it. It just was. It wasn't a thing that I just didn't know that. I thought it was normal, and it was normal because no one ever went, oh my gosh, these. I don't even think I talked about it like, oh, I've seen this and I've seen that. I just thought it was because magic was all around us, and that was just part of it, which is quite interesting, really.
Yeah. Do you think it's possible that you had a little bit more disinterest than you should have in terms of talking about it or thinking about it? Now, like if I would have saw that, or I would think that even if you were aware, or your parents told you when you were younger that, yeah, magic is real, you can definitely perform real magic feats, and it's completely authentic, that you would still be kind of maybe a bit surprised and excited. And it's especially, it's such a close proximity, this appears to you, this thing that you've never seen before up until that point. It's something entirely new, in the world. I mean,
I'd seen a lot of strange things in my childhood there, James. So having a mother like I had, there was always a seance happening. There was always, there was a time when we lived with followers of an Indian guru in an ashram situation, and he would perform miracles. So they were all just part and parcel of our life together. I don't recall, maybe I did. I don't recall it being something odd. The only thing that now looking back is when these orange suns would appear, I would end up with a really sore tummy, a stomach. Forever. I remember
always.
It would happen a lot of the time, and I was taken to normal physicians, herbalists, witch doctors, all kinds of, healers, Reiki masters. And I used to call it a hot belly, hot tummy. And no doctor could ever get to the bottom of what this was. And I remember having tests and things in my childhood. But even then, I don't think I put or verbally spoke about, I've seen this thing and now my tummy hurts. And that's quite interesting, because now as an adult and the work that I do now with experiences and some of the things I'm involved with, maybe that was some kind of physiological symptom of the interaction. It was making me a little sick. And it was quite a transient sort of hot belly, as I called it. But that's the one thing I do remember that was a bit not right, perhaps.
Let's come back to this thread, but I just wanted to be thorough and just allude to what I was kind of referring to when I speculated that maybe there was a little bit more disinterest than would be average, even for someone with your belief structure. There is just a lot of encounters that people have, and with orbs in particular, where they don't behave quite as they would. Even people, who've never seen an orb. I know one person I've had on the show, her father, was just very enthusiastic about the UFO subject and always wanted to see something. And this family has some strange things going on, military background and so forth. And when there was a really dramatic encounter one evening with several orbs, orange orbs in the sky, he behaved extremely oddly and strangely and wanted nothing to do with it. Just, yeah, I see them, and essentially walk back into the house. And you just hear that a lot. And so I'm always kind of interested in that, and that kind of, because it indicates that there's some mind element to this. There's some people would say mind control or some kind of influence, potentially, affecting your consciousness for some reason. So it kind of hints at, something larger, and so if there is that element there, it may be significant. But your sure that there's nothing unusual. It's just completely accounted for your level of interest or fascination with
I
these.
just don't recall it being a big deal, really. It was, and it has been throughout my life. These things, still interact with me to this day. And now I have a greater kind of reaction and perhaps understanding about the relationship I may have with them or whatever they may be. But as a child, I don't recall it being traumatic, or I felt the only thing was the tummy thing. My memory is that they would come at like poignant times, and maybe retrospectively, maybe the emotive and poignant times is the reason as to why they came, and there was an intelligence and relationship to that. But that's my speculation as an adult. As a child, I was just, fairies, elves, goblins, witches, magic, the unseen. It wasn't a stretch. It just was.
Yeah. So the fact that it came during particular times of transition, and you say, happy kind of maybe emotional occasions. Do you think it was kind of supportive in a way, or almost to kind of herald that moment, like to kind of be there at a significant time, to associate itself with whatever was going on, or do you think that's it? Because that's what I would kind of think, like it's there's something meaningful, it's some intelligence, and it's showing itself, during significant, periods of your life, like a human, would, like when we're there for each other, on each other's birthdays and, days that are significant. And that's what I would kind of think maybe is possibly going on. But then you say the stomach thing, and I'm wondering if that couldn't be an aspect which has a deeper dimension to it, as far as I know, like certainly abduction researchers, the great majority of them would think, definitely, probably, whether you're aware of it or not, missing time had occurred, you were taken, something was done, and the stomach effects was residual from whatever procedures you went through. But that's kind of young. You were, I think you said in another podcast, 8 or 9 years old.
Yeah, I was small, very small.
Which is early for reproductive procedures with abduction events.
I wholly don't believe there was any abduction scenarios with these things. I really don't. I really veer away from that. I don't believe that it was that at all. Because my reason for being quite strong on that is, these orbs have still been prevalent in my adult life, and there hasn't been missing time. I've been fully cognitively aware of their interaction with me. I really do not believe that has happened to me at all.
Okay.
And it's I know people who have gone through that experience, and I feel for the plight and blight that it's put on their life. But I don't believe that's my journey or my tale with them at all.
Right. Okay, yeah, and the only reason I bring it up is because there's just many, accounts of orb encounters which accompany missing time events, and when these people are typically regressed back to that point, there does turn out to be. But not to say, though, that I really think that the orbs, and maybe we should, get into a deeper conversation about orbs, and be interested what you know about them and what you have discovered. They are definitely multifunction. I think that there's just clearly not one singular purpose, for the appearance of these orbs. There's just too much diversity in terms of the types of experience and types of orbs, and a lot of multifariousness just with all of these encounters, that I think that It's a technology that they're using, for a number of different things. Let's get into that maybe a little bit, and then we'll jump into some more of your experiences. What do you think the orbs were? What's your conclusion or best guess as to the function and purpose of the orbs in your situation?
Well, I had a pretty nasty accident a couple of years ago, really nasty, and was in a high dependent unit, awaiting a really long surgery on my leg for me to keep my leg. And I remember being at the point of despair, not great mentally, and I felt this urge to look out to the stars and just daydream, and I felt that they would come. And I remember having the healthcare assistant, please can you move my bed in the room? I want to look out of the window. And it was a quite rural hospital. And ping, ping, pong, they came. And I feel that was indicative of the 20, 30 plus year long relationship that I have with them. And I believe that there is a relationship now, and that relationship has existed since I was a child. And I feel, and this, I don't want this to sound ego driven, it's just my speculation. I feel that whatever they are have had an interest in me, and now I have an interest in them, and it's become a relationship that's two ways. And I find that quite an interesting place to put myself, because I really do believe that whatever they are, there is a they and a they with me, and we have a relationship that I didn't ask for, but I feel that my life has gone in a certain direction as a result of that relationship. The very fact that you and I are talking, the very fact that I do the work that I do, the very fact that I have the things that I do within the UAP topic now, is this all driven because of their interest in me? And I believe that to be the case. And I know how that sounds, and I know that sounds wild, but every road I travel, I think, has now become as a result of a relationship with this unknown. But that they may be unknown, but they're known to me. There's a relationship we've formed.
It really doesn't sound wild once you start talking to enough people,
right,
into this field, and then you find out everybody's, having stuff like this go on, including myself. I've very, kind of similar background in that way, in terms of, and it seemed to me, and I think what you're hinting at as far as purpose, they're making their presence known to you, perhaps for reasons of support and emotional support
and guidance. I think has it been a guiding force or a guiding hand? Because if I hadn't have gone searching as a teenager on the UFO topic and discovered things online and all of that jazz, I would never have discovered an article online about orbs and put the two and two together, and it would have never fueled what I believe is my life's work. So would I be here if it wasn't for them? So there was an interest. It's been with me since childhood, and I sometimes think to myself, but why me? I'm not special, I'm not different, why me? But there's a reason, and that reason is unfolding. I think, I'm 40 soon, and I find myself in the midst of so much brilliant and wonder in this community. And I don't believe it's by chance. I believe the genesis of it all began at 9 years old, 9 years old. I was nearly 9. I think I just turned 8. I was coming into 9. The genesis of this began in that place when I sat with a can of soda and they appeared. It started then, and here we are now all these years later. So it was the genesis of this, maybe.
Yeah. So it's not just support. It was also fundamental in shaping your trajectory,
Absolutely.
and your direction.
Mm-hmm.
So it's it's really significant, the impact that these have had. So I wanted to share this story. I think audience might find it interesting. I've just been researching the contact account of not a very well-known experiencer, but someone that closely worked with Carla Turner, the late abduction researcher who, was in league with, all of the legacy abduction researchers, Bud Hopkins, David Jacobs, and John Mack, and so forth. And his name is Ted Rice, and he had an interesting encounter with an orb and was actually relayed from it information about the orb. He was given a download. Well, so the account goes like this. He was in bed at night, hadn't fallen asleep yet. All of a sudden, a red-orange glowing orb comes straight in through the wall, comes up to his body, very close proximity, and suddenly there's a voice, although as far as I can tell, it wasn't a telepathic voice. It was, I don't know if you've ever heard of accounts like this. Some people describe, in some experiences, a mechanical sounding voice.
Yes, I've had this.
Yeah. And I think his impulse was to reach out and touch it. And he suddenly heard a mechanical voice say, "Stop. Don't be alarmed," or something to that effect. "I'm only here to deliver a message."
Crikey.
And then this experience happened where, we would regard this as a download, where it literally felt to him like pages of information, like they had just pressed enter on the computer and stored a bunch of information into himself, but none of it was decipherable or recognizable at that moment. It was only until later on, after he had gone to sleep and slept and woke up the next day, that the information started to emerge in his conscious awareness. And interestingly, it was information about the orb itself.
Wow.
And I'll consult my notes real quick here. And of course, I don't have it on the correct page. So what they basically told him is that it was in fact controlled from a UFO. They were controlling. There was some intelligence controlling it from the UFO, which they referred to as the UFOs. Interestingly, life support vehicles. I don't know if you've ever heard that term. Coming from.
No, that's a new one on me.
Yeah, that's the first time I've ever heard that. That's what these beings, at least conveyed to us. I mean, who knows, what they actually call it, but
yeah,
that was, in terms of putting it in our language, the closest translation. And they basically said it was a scanner. It was something. Oh, I forgot to mention a scanner of a sort. I forgot to mention one particular detail. When it came before the download, and it came really close, he was able to get a really, really good look at it. And from what he could tell, it had grooves running across it. And within these grooves, kind of like grooves running across the circumference.
So it's like solid?
I don't know if he specified whether it was solid. I think this kind of implies, the way he's describing it here, that there was some kind of solidity.
Right.
But there was grooves in it. And within these grooves, he said it looked like there was nickel-sized, almost like seeming lenses, which kind of moved around and seemed to kind of focus in different parts of the room. And that's the first time I've ever heard that. Most people don't. Like he was so close to the orb that it was, an arm's away.
Goodness. Yeah, I've never heard anything like this in the thousands of experiences I've spoke to over the
me neither. But But there is a lot of variation, like, some people see orbs that are not orange at all, or blue. Terry Sherman, previous owner of Skinwalker Ranch, the orbs that he saw, he felt like they had like what looked like a glass-like exterior to them with a kind of blue swirling inside. And they emitted a kind of static kind of sound, which Ted Rice doesn't report. And a lot of people don't report, although some people do.
Have you heard about Nick Kyle's? I've got images. I was at a thing with him. He's Scottish. He's from the UK. He put some pictures up of orbs that had faces in them. Actual.
Yeah. Were they orbs that you could see with the naked eye, or were they orbs that you only see with the camera? Oh, you could see them with the eyes.
And they were captured on camera as well, and you can see faces in them, human faces. And that's the first time I'd ever seen like the actual like imagery. And so wow. Lenses. Wow, you've kind of blew my head with that one. Thanks, James. Yeah. I'll be trying to rabbit hole later on that one. Thank you. I found
that really interesting. And I'd actually like, what's this person's name again before I get back to
Nick Kyle. Yeah.
Kyle, Kyle.
Yeah, they're from Scotland. Phenomenal researchers. And they were involved in the skull experiment, which I don't know if you know about.
Oh, yes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was actually pivotal. Learning about the skull experiment happened very early on in my formative years, learning about this topic. And that was something that kind of really convinced me that there was a reality to the paranormal.
The good people.
I remember.
Good people.
Yeah. But anyway, so getting back to Ted Rice, so he was given a download about the nature of the orb. And it essentially said that they were a scam. Take this with a grain of salt too, everyone. We have no idea, the veracity for sure of what he's being told about it. But this is interesting, and it's what he was told. And so it was a scanner, and it was essentially to inspect the dwelling before their couriers, which they refer to, are sent inside to conduct the mission.
Whoa.
And to essentially, if I can bring up this paragraph here, the controller of the orb is able to see where every person is located, how many are in each room, and if they are asleep or awake. Are they dressed or armed in any way? Are there any animals around? Will the contactee need to be manipulated to another room so as not to disturb the others? Which sometimes happens with abduction events. They get this feeling to, either maybe sometimes go outside the house or into a room and conduct the capture in a different location other than the bedroom.
These all sound not hostile, but almost not military is the wrong word, but like they're on a mission, like they're there for like really.
Yeah.
I don't know how I feel about that. That feels altogether so much different to my experience. That feels like apples and oranges, night and day. Like that feels a little bit scary.
Well, he was very unsettled by it, even though he was someone that had a lot of previous paranormal encounters. He did not like. He felt it was very invasive.
That's it, invasive. That's the word I was looking. Very invasive.
Yeah. He actually, at the end of that experience, it started to kind of drift out towards the bedroom door and out into the hall. He got up and tried to chase it down.
Yeah.
And it immediately picked up speed and went into kind of evasive maneuvers, started turning at right angles, and then just and he was also told, interestingly, I should make a point of this as well, like as he was going to touch it, he was told very firmly by the mechanical voice to stop. Because I think some of these, to stop, do not touch, the orb.
Because it might have been hurt or something, like some kind of radiation.
Right. Yeah. And I get the impression that, and I just want to say though, the orbs that you experience, we don't know for sure whether these are all even related. Just because something is spherical and it's, it's orange and it's glowing, doesn't mean it's the same exact thing to another thing that seems to have, a similar description. But yeah, he was told to stop, and that did kind of give the impression that there was some danger if he would have reached out and touched it. And going back to Terry Sherman, the owner of Skinwalker Ranch, he did have a horrific interaction with an orb that apparently killed his dog. His dog had run after it, and I think caught up to it, and killed his dog. And so I think there are other accounts of that, and I think there are other accounts of people having physical effects, not necessarily death per se, but physical effects from the orb, perhaps radiation. I don't know, but
and that James is, as an adult and being deep into the research and reading what we can get our hands on, that's when I started to remember about the hot belly, the tummy thing. What was that a result?
Yeah, what was that? Yeah,
a radiation thing. I don't think back in the early 90s to schlep your daughter to a doctor and say this kid might have been near something that had radiation. I don't think any doctor would test me for radiation, because why would a 9-year-old child that's been skipping through cornfields be exposed to that? So I was thinking about this the other day. I'd love to get my hands on my medical records to maybe look back and see, did my mother ever say she's claiming to see these things? But I just don't believe they would have checked me for that at all. But maybe it was a physiological symptom as a result of whatever these things are. But interestingly, as an adult, I haven't had
any problems with your abdominal region of stomach or anything like that?
None whatsoever. None. So again, it remains, the mystery remains. The two may not be linked. They feel linked, but they may not be.
Yeah, I mean, correlation isn't always causation. There could have been other things. One more thing to say about the orbs I thought was of interest, and this was also something noted by Terry Sherman, and many others, abductees as well, have noticed this feature with the orbs, but I suspect that you haven't in your case, because this is more kind of negative seeming. There seems to be, when encountering the orbs on some occasions, an unnatural fear that kind of emerges in the witness to the orb. Terry Sherman felt distinctly like the level of fear that was evoked in him was off the charts. I mean, he was just in utter panic, over the orb. And it didn't, and others have said this too, and it doesn't seem to make sense given what you're seeing, unless sometimes ontological shock, you're seeing something, that it shouldn't exist, and that has suddenly, whether or not, it's just a light, before you, it has shattered your conception, your framework of reality. And there can be a really kind of tremendous kind of emotional upheaval just from that, of oh my God, this is real. This can't be, kind of feeling.
And that's very frightening, and that's very scary, because you're dealing with the most exceptional, bizarre experience that you can't frame because you've got no reference point, and you start to question. It's very destabilizing and very scary for people when they've led a very ordinary life and then these things happen to them. And I can appreciate how frightening that must be for somebody. It wasn't in my case because I didn't think it would be. I didn't know it to be scary. I thought it was just whatever. But I speak to a lot of experiences all over the world, and it is frightening. Of course it would be. Of course, in some respects, you're not expecting this to happen, right?
Yeah, you're not expecting it to be possible.
Absolutely.
Specifically. And then it's suddenly tangibly apparent that it is, and you're confronted with the inner gut feeling, oh my God, everything I knew was wrong, essentially, if this is happening, or I'm crazy, and that's another sort of layer of the sort of fear.
Of course.
But abductees have also said the same thing about these orbs. And I remember, and I used to have a clip of this, but I don't know if I'd be able to find it. One abductee who, as some abductees come to do, as they progress throughout their experiences, they want to eventually have a conscious experience, that they want to remember the experience and kind of interact with the ETs on an equal playing field, and this is something that John Mack, really encouraged and seemed to, with many abductees, change the nature of their experiences once they kind of really confronted them. And this guy felt like he was just absolutely solidly determined to do this, and he really felt that the next times he has an experience and is confronted with an ET or any of the phenomena, that he would be resolved to just endure it and not break down into utter panic. And then shortly afterward, within weeks, he encounters an orb which comes into the bedroom, and he just falls to pieces, just absolutely falls to pieces, and just utter panic. And so it makes one think that in some cases with orbs, there could be some mental emotional manipulation going on, that maybe the orb in itself the appearance of the orb to the person doesn't fully account for. Or again, it's the ontological shock, which is maybe another alternative explanation to account for just the abject terror of something like that.
I can appreciate these cases, and I can appreciate what these people have gone through. It's just so altogether different from my experiences. So sometimes it's hard to fully understand when my experience in that respect with orbs. I have had a more startling encounter, but that was not with orbs. It's hard sometimes for me to align both of them, because my experiences have been mostly positive or business as usual. I have had orbs in my home that my child saw, and my child got quite concerned, but just because he wasn't, you're not expecting things to appear. And again, he was young and, he didn't get it. But it's just, I find it personal, and I can empathize and I can understand. And of course, I appreciate anyone's suffering that they've been through as a result of these encounters and having an exceptional experience like that. But it's just so far removed from my own that it does really make me feel that there's, and we touched on it just before, I believe strongly there are different types with different function and perhaps different form. We hear about the different colors, the green, the blues, the oranges, and are they different types from different, sent by different, like we could speculate for a millennia, but I do feel strongly that there are different types, and that is why my brain starts to go, because that proposition of multiple types of orbs, are they intelligent? Are they intelligently controlled? What are they? Where have they come from? Who sent them? Are they alive? Are they not? Are they blah, 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 blah. It just makes you have so many questions. And I don't know if we'll ever fully truly have an answer. And that's the sticking part, right? Well, we may never have an answer to this.
Yeah, I personally think that with everything with this phenomenon, I don't think you can ever reach full certainty about anything. I think you can get close, and I think we ought to. Some of us, I think, ought to take up the task of trying to comprehend, what's going on. I think it would be well if we did have more understanding. But yeah, I think that with everything, and especially just given just the pervasiveness of manipulation and just the robust kind of deceptive element that we're all contending with, and that interference, we just, everything's really kind of, I think, open to question, everything, given that, if you're dealing with advanced intelligences, you pretty much have to price in that they've got technology that could probably do anything that you could imagine, that would fool you into believing that it was God, et cetera. And that's just, what we have to price in, I think. Another thread to the orb phenomenon is these encounters where people witness, let's say, like a crypt or like Bigfoot, for example. I don't know if you entertain the possibility of Bigfoot. I have to.
And we have a whole category on our app, Nanu, around cryptozoology. I always get it wrong. It's not something I have flirted or danced with too much, but I think there's an element of conversation that should be had. But it's not a massive knowledge bank that I have. I've been very blessed to meet some great researchers. We've got some good ones here in the UK as well, but it's not an arena I necessarily get just because I haven't had a personal experience. But I say that, but I was brought up believing in fairies and elemental creatures that come from another dimension. So nothing's off the table.
Yeah, right. I'm the same. It's definitely not my area of expertise, but I mean, it's just a simple fact that there might be even more people that see Bigfoot than UFOs or aliens. Just the sheer numbers alone give one the impression that there's some there. And if you just talk to people and you just, as with the UFO phenomenon, you realize, oh, they're completely sane, and this is pretty extensive and detailed, this story, and I don't think they're lying to me. And then you just keep encountering more and more and more people like that.
You do, and I'm always reminded, of what Jacques Vallée, speaks about, does the phenomenon present itself in other ways? Passport to Magonia, one of my favorite books. The phenomenon may present in multitude of different ways. I come from an Irish family, and my grandma had a healthy respect for the little folk, the fairies, not Tinkerbell, not a Disney fairy, but she had a real healthy respect of the fae. She would never leave children outside by themselves in case they were taken. She would always leave silver out at certain times. And, and I was, I'm a product of that as well. I always leave a light on at home for any wayward small people that they don't need to, they can pass through and not stay here in my home. And is the fae another cryptid of sorts? Some would say yes. So again, the phenomena can present in ways that many different ways.
Yeah, and it's all but clear that there exists some kind of psionic, psychic means of altering one's perception to appear to that person as anything. And I think that might explain a lot of the cryptid phenomena, or some of it, that something is masking itself as, especially when you hear stories like the giant frog stories. There's actually like a lot of people, and I know two people who, one, when they were little, encountered a like human-sized frog or like
wow
foot frog. Is there really a giant frog cryptid, or is it something that's masking it? We know that there have been grays. People have seen grays actually mask themselves as owls, large 4-foot
Owls.
they're doing this kind of thing. I think anything that is not us, that hasn't been completely incapacitated through whatever means they've incapacitated, has this ability to interfere with perception. And so I think there's a lot of that going on. And
Right.
there's probably occasions where these beings that are coming to the planet for whatever reasons, and I think there's a lot of things that go on like that, beings that are doing things on the ground. I've heard about beings, and I wonder about this, that go around and collect honey, and honey's like a huge sort of resource to them. And
I always think about this. Wasn't there a case? I was speaking to a friend about it. Wasn't there? I need to add it onto the app. Wasn't there a case like in the late 50s or something? These beings got out of a craft and were asking people for like sandwiches or like something really innocuous, and I'm like, what? Like they were out like asking people for, I don't think it's sandwiches, it's something really equally as silly and goofy, but they were like out there asking for these like things. Like what?
Like something that just wouldn't make any sense. I haven't heard that account, but
I don't think it's sandwiches. So for listeners, I don't think it's sandwiches. I'm just trying to pull from the corners of my, but it was something really innocuous, like just like silly, like a cake or a biscuit, or it was something so silly. I thought, you're telling me there's alien beings stepping out of a craft, as they might as well ask for a McDonald's. What? Like that's what? But again,
it's like Jacques Vallée pointed out, like there were a lot of elements to the phenomenon like this that just do not make any sense, and it led him to believe that they're maybe toying with us sometime, or they're testing us, or there's something going on like that. There's just things that just make no rational sense whatsoever, and could only be explained by the fact that there's some kind of psychological experimentation or testing of people, or something, maybe to even seed the narrative with ridiculousness, so as to discredit and kind of muddy the waters. It could even be something like that.
It could be so many things, and that is the the investigation of the unknown. And I say this all of the time: once you start interacting with the phenomena starts interacting back. It's a two-way street. And I believe the phenomena, in all of its colors and flavors and guises, it's a bit cleverer than us. It's a bit smarter than us. And I do, through my own experience and experiences of people I trust and value and know they're credible, I think there is a playful is probably a light word, that they play and they interfere and they manipulate and they trick, and there is a trickster element to it. And for us not to acknowledge that, you have a lot of camps in ufology, don't you? You have your sort of love and light, and it's all kumbaya and it's all great fun. And then you have your darker side of ufology, where we're having people abducted, we have animals being mutilated, we have people having implants, we have people's bodies being interfered with, people taken, people have gone missing. But there is this trickster element to this intelligence, whatever this intelligence may be. And as we investigate this unknown, there are some knowns within that, and there is an element of that to this. They could be whoever they may be, of course, or wherever they've come from. They could be playing with us. We could be an experiment. We could be being tended to. We could be a garden of human beings. There's a lot of coulds, but we don't know a lot of shoulds. It's what drives us all to be having these conversations, right?
Yeah, right. I have gotten the impression through listening to psychonauts and people that delve into DMT and ayahuasca and other psychedelics, and their encounters with those entities.
Very different.
A lot of these stories, they're different, but they give the impression, I think, in some cases, that they enjoy seeing our reaction, perhaps, to things. maybe just in the same way that we love, seeing people's reactions to things, pranks. I mean, myself in particular, what I enjoy probably the most, in terms of humor is, pranks and people's reactions to things that are unexpected and strange and weird and different. And I wonder if there isn't a great deal of beings and intelligences out there who have something like that going on psychologically, or however you want to describe it, mentally, where they just love, they get great enjoyment possibly from witnessing our reaction to things, and maybe even trickery, like for instance, the kind of trickery that went on with the Sherman family, actually, on Skinwalker Ranch, for example, where items would go missing and, cause a stir in the house. Who took it? What the heck? Like, where's my thing at? And then it would reappear. And there's a lot of stuff like that that kind of seems almost straightforwardly like games, like they're getting reactions out of us. Yeah. And perhaps they're liking the reaction. They're actually getting some satisfaction of some kind from the reactions, and they're doing it. Maybe that's the whole reason.
And I've thought about this. Certainly, when I've been doing a lot of paranormal investigations with like poltergeist phenomena, do they, whoever they may be, because we don't know, maybe it's the reaction, but the emotion that comes from the reaction is that feeding them with something that they perhaps
thinking about
themselves. I was listening to dear Whitley Strayber the other night talking about how the beings that he's kind of in communication with, how they all speak telepathically, but they can make like sounds. And it made me think, like, if they don't have the ability to talk because if they don't have the vocal cords that we have, and then maybe there is a real interest in how we communicate verbally, because it's something that they don't have the ability to do. So, I don't think it's a stretch of a speculation if our reaction naturally will produce pheromones and hormones and a release of oxytocin or stress hormone or what have you. Maybe that is something that they like, or they take, or they feed off, or they similar. I don't know, but it could be possible. The thing is, James, anything could be possible, and that is the investigation of the unknown. Until we have definitive, which I don't believe we will have definitive. I don't believe we are there technologically, spiritually, emotionally, all of the lees. I don't think we're there yet. Maybe we'll never be there. But it's interesting though. It keeps me awake at night.
Yeah, I really do entertain the possibility that there's different beings or types of consciousnesses that prefer different qualities of energy, different forms of energy. Like we know that there seems to be some beings that prefer very low vibrational kind of fear and dread and pain kind of emotions, and actually feed off that. I think there's a lot of evidence that there exists extraterrestrials like that. And then you hear about other extraterrestrials, like I've heard about extraterrestrials, and this person seemed really credible to me. I can't remember who it was. And they don't feed off that kind of energy, but they feed off of the energy of like worship and like not necessarily love, but like he said, like when people worship this or that, whatever they're associated with, I think they kind of have like a something that they're represented as, that people worship, which really the energy goes to them. They feed off of that energy. And then you hear, entities like succubuses and incubuses who feed off of sexual energy. And it just seems like maybe there's this kind of just panoply of different, types of energies that, different types of beings, for whatever reason or other, prefer.
I think that is the case, because we are energetical beings, and as the late Robert Monroe said, we are more than our physical bodies, and we have an energetic signature, which brings into the whole conversation around what consciousness is and non-local or what have you. But I've dwelled on this point a lot, and I think there is an energy aspect to it, because when you look at these different cases and different sections, as you've just rightly touched on, different beings can be attracted to different types of emotion and energy. So I do think that is certainly a vein of thought that isn't in the realms of craziness. I think that kind of it's right. It kind of feels like it makes sense in a senseless environment.
It seems like there's a lot of grounds when you really kind of explore this, and so who knows if there isn't, a subset of beings out there that for some reason prefer the emotional energy that comes from us when we're being fooled with, or when we're confused, or when they play trickery on us. I mean, maybe there is some kind of particular kind of emotional energy stemming from us in those kinds of situations that some beings enjoy or prefer, or get something out of, or take in somehow and are benefited by.
But then James, it begs the question: is that part of a formation of a relationship? They're taking something from us. We are perhaps gaining something from them unwittingly, and it brings me back to that point of our relationship with them. And I believe that we do, as a species, as humans, we do have a relationship with them. Do we understand that relationship? No. Are we trying to? Yes. But that, we listened to a fantastic talk by Dr. Peter Skafish at Soul Conference in October, and it moved me more than anything I've ever encountered in this topic, in terms of research or conversations or dialogue or people I'm so grateful to be exposed to. He spoke about relationship and seeing ourselves in them and them in us, and we often think about these, we think of craft and we think of orbs, but sometimes we don't think about a relationship that is potentially forming between us and them. And that relationship exchange, is that why we have more experiences now? Is that why there is from my research from summer 2021, there seemed to be an explosion of people having more new experiences with the phenomena, more orb encounters. There just seemed more and more people switched on. It's the only phrase I can give. And I'm talking, I've spoken to over 2,000 people easily globally. That something happened in 2021, the summer, where they started to have encounters. And I think, is that because a relationship is now forming in a way with them and us?
Like, maybe we've opened the door, like now the doors are fully open, and, we're now kind of more en masse kind of accepting of it and open to experiences. In previous decade, just 10, 20 years ago, people, there's much more of the ontological shock, because people were just much more sort of boxed into a very kind of postage stamp kind of reality. And now that's really shifting. There's a lot more people even the perception of the possible has really expanded in terms of people believing in aliens, and perhaps that's contributing to this as well. And maybe there is some kind of real restriction, and maybe always has been, in terms of the possibility of encounters and experiences if you don't accept that it exists. I think there is some kind of weird energetic complications possibly there,
right?
If you're completely shut off. I know, like many experiencers, say that one in particular used the phrase like, we can't even see them because of our framework conception of reality. You know,
Right.
our consciousness literally, or something, maybe the brain, or I don't know, mind, edits it out. You know, like they can appear and we just literally won't see it because we don't believe in the possibility. Now there's a lot of like debate in this particular area, and you know, many experiences, of course, that have happened to people where they're suddenly encountered with something that they certainly did not believe in before, but yet it was there in full solid form, and their conceptual belief framework didn't seem to account for much at all, you know, in terms of that possible or not possible. But yet you have a lot of other kind of stories on the other side that kind of suggest that there's something to that.
I agree.
I don't know how it works.
And I also think, without getting too Star Trek about it, because I'm a bit Star Trek, you know, is there a prime directive? Is there a, you know, they don't interact because of X? Maybe we are not ready. Maybe we haven't, you know, got to a certain place. And, you know, I talk about this quite frequently. You know, for 70 odd years, we've had, you know, I've been a public relations person, a communications person corporately for a long time. That's what I do. Excuse me. And I feel that there has been, by design, rightly or wrongly, you know, fight with me in the comments over that, but by design, there's been an acclimation process for the general public that has been through movies and films and documentaries and books and and all of this kind of slow subconscious prod about the existence of extraterrestrial life, about the proposition of us not being alone. You know, look at the reaction we've had to the Steven Spielberg trailer that dropped not long ago. Look at the reaction that we had from X-Files. You know, there's many of these things, and I think that public acclamation campaign, and I believe that to be a campaign, that has started to enable people to have more conversations and desensitize us to the proposition that I believe we're not alone. I know we're not alone, but Janet and John that might live at number 75, you know, down the road, they might not be there yet. But I think is these publicity PR campaigns of this proposition is starting to aid more conversations and understanding, which might then support the reduction of an ontological shocked society. Because if we all started to kind of, you know, I think there was a poll in America recently, you know, 54% of Americans believed that there was the existence of extraterrestrial life. You know, if we'd done that 20 years ago, people would have been much less.
Totally different, yeah.
Stigma, the ridicule. I faced so much ridicule a couple of years ago because I'm so public about my experience, and I will always be public because experience of voices do matter. And I think some of the disclosure side of things will be through experiences, less so than, you know, shady powers of government, but that's a whole other conversation. But I do think that the reduction of the stigma through this public potential acclamation campaign is helpful to the cause.
And do you think their intentions are pure in terms of that public acclamation campaign through movies and media and television, or do you think that there's some ulterior motives potentially with that?
I think it's to onboard en masse understanding, and I know that sounds crackerjacker, but
it's to what? Repeat that sentence again. It's to.
I think it's purposely designed, and I think it's to publicly desensitize the proposition, so it won't be as ontologically shocking when this, whatever this may be. And I do feel we're closer than ever to some form of disclosure. I don't think we're ever going to get 100% of what this is, because I don't think we actually know. I don't think anyone in this world has 100% knowledge of what this phenomena is. But the public acclamation campaign, I believe, is to support the desensitization, to reduce ontological shock, perhaps.
So that society will wind up being more stable and less disrupted when disclosure day or whenever they potentially on their own accord, which certainly have been revealed themselves.
There was a great article in the UK Times. A very good friend of mine, Helen McCaw, she's a former economist at the Bank of England. She wrote a paper about the economic stability of disclosure and what that would do to to society, and what it would do to the markets, what it would do to banks. And I encourage everyone to check that out, because it's very important. And there will be an ontological shock. People are not fully prepared for this proposition, but I think people can handle it. And I think strongly that the truth, whatever the truth may be, should be onboarded. We need truth. The skies aren't classified. The universe isn't classified. We have a right to understand our place in the universe. And the people that have been abducted, the people that have had lifelong experiences that has completely changed their life, for the good and for the bad in some cases. Maybe the ontological shock that we think is coming won't be as wild, because we've seeded some of this into the zeitgeist already, that aliens exist, this exists, we're not alone in the universe. And I'm for that, because I believe in that people are now ready for this. It can't just be with people like you and I. This is for everybody.
Yeah, and I think really what it largely rests on, and maybe which we're not thinking about that much, is it may all depend on, like, whenever it happens, whether it's disclosure by the government or whether it's a revealing by themselves, it will depend largely on what the public messaging is that's circulating about it, and the framing of it all, as to how we'll react and what direction it will go in. Not that there won't be, of course, I think a sort of core group of people, which is hopefully, pretty large at this point, that will be kind of unswayed by that media narrative, because so many people, have turned off from the mainstream media apparatus. But that will be a key component as to, so if the messaging is proper and it's, done well, I think we could certainly handle it. And if it's, spun in a way, that makes it seem like, we're being invaded, or something like that, then it could get pretty bad. I mean, judging by how everybody reacted to COVID, quote unquote COVID, and the crisis with toilet paper and so forth, you would think that, it could be pretty bad. But that was entirely due in that situation to the public messaging about it, and the drumming up of fear. That's why we reacted as bad as we did then. It had everything to do with the media narrative at the time.
I think there's so many strands to this that it's impossible to call. But selfishly, perhaps, I feel that we can investigate the unknown. We can keep asking questions. We can look at this phenomena and how it onboards. And what a time to be alive. What a time to be alive. And it circles me back to our initial sort of your question to me about orbs as a child. Is that a reason why these things presented themselves to me? So I'm now in a position that I am, where I talk about this to anybody and everybody. I'm involved with so many different places and spaces, not just UFO folks. I do advocate in non-UFO worlds about this subject. I'm a very ordinary person. I'm somebody's mom. I've got a very good career. I'm very stable. I'm very together. And people don't expect someone like me to have a conversation about the proposition that we are not alone in this universe, and we have company, and we are not alone here in this planet. There is something interacting with us and has been for a very long time. Let's talk about it. And maybe that's why those orbs came to me. Maybe so I would be in this position that we can have this conversation, and that is what makes my brain go, because how mad and wild of a ride that is. Maybe that was their intention. Cue spooky music.
Which means that they knew before you were even developed, though, when you were a child, that you were suitable, for that purpose, which kind of,
right.
could make you think, how did they know that? Or is there kind of, as some suggest, some kind of spiritual soul connection, that we have to some of these groups, which I completely entertain. I think that is completely possible, that even abductees, the people who get abducted and go through procedures and are involved in hybridization programs, they may well be, I don't rule it out at all, part of those races that are abducting. They might be part of that group, and this was all, intentional, and it's all maybe, above board somewhere, like this is legally being done, because they have the full permission of the soul that's involved. And although there's a kind of amnesia, going on with people. What do you think? Like, have you encountered anything in your experiences that made you feel, that there's some, maybe ancient connection, going way back, to previous lifetimes that you had with these?
I just feel there's been a purpose to this all, and if I was, and it sounds again egotistical, but I'm just using the words I have available to me right now in this conversation, if those orbs came to me and selected me for this purpose as a child, there was an impetus to do that. There was a reason to do that. Right. So then it does make me think bigger, makes me have bigger questions about why. Is there a grand, as you touched on before, is there a grander plan? I was at I think with the Mama Institute last summer or the summer before, and I was deep in one of their meditations, and it was about asking questions about purpose. And what came to me during that beautiful period was, you're to communicate, you're to communicate, you're to communicate. And I just found that really curious, that I'm a communicator. That's what I do in my corporate life. I'm involved with lots of different communications around the UAP topic now. I have the privilege of talking in so many places and spaces, and being involved in lots of things, both publicly and privately. And it's all around communication. So did those orbs come to fulfill a purpose? It just makes my brain melt. It really does. But maybe there is an ancient component to this. Maybe Earth is a ground, not a breeding ground, but maybe Earth is a place where things are purposely driven for reasons unknown about our place in the universe. And that's when we start getting into a lot of woo territory, and it becomes a bit more spiritual. And then it makes you think about religion, and it makes you think about angels and demons and the whole religious narrative. And you start getting into the whole ancient aliens theories and this and that, and you can be a spinning top of speculation. That there is a reason why we have company in this reality, and that is just literally what keeps me awake at night.
Yeah.
Right? It's not crazy. That's the wrong choice of word. It's something. There's a there, right?
Right.
Good questions.
I wanted to get into, but maybe we should in a future podcast. I wanted to get into CE5. I have a lot of interesting CE5 encounters, and I organically kind of just discovered it, know,
Okay.
without even being aware of Stephen Greer or you know, his protocols or anything, back in like 2014. But that's probably a larger conversation. Maybe we'll just finish out with, I wanted to hear about your experience in this kind of, you know, connected to your CE5 activities, but your encounter with what you refer to as something that looks similar to the same beings that Whitley Strieber had encountered.
So short version, yeah, no, we can get into it, no problem. Very comfortable to talk about it. I was heavily involved in the C5 community here in the UK. I'm not much of or I call it HICE, human initiated contact events, because I'm trained in several contact modalities. I've spent time with Mission Rama, which is a South American contact organization. You know, growing up the way I did, mum was always making contact with other, you know, deep into meditation. But I kind of veer away a little bit from C5, but that's another conversation for another day. Anyway, I was deep into the C5 community, leading a lot of expeditions out into the field and having a lot of success. I think the current word of the day is summon. I have great success with making that happen because I have a relationship, I believe, with them, as we've touched on. However, I was at home one afternoon, and I'm really big on meditation. It's a big part of my life. It keeps me grounded, and it's just something I grew up with. I think we probably spent some time with monks from somewhere at some point in my wild childhood, so probably embedded young. Anyhow, I was doing a meditation, a really deep one. And long story short, my dog was growling, and beings presented themselves around me at home. And this was not like an orb encounter. This was something else.
So you were in a very deep state of meditation, right? Like you would have been meditating for hours, and you were like in, you know, like deep in alpha or theta or delta or something.
Yeah. Very deep, very, very deep.
And how did you perceive them? Did you perceive them with your physical eyes as physical beings, or did you see them in your mind's eye?
I physically. So I came out of the meditation because my dog was growling. So that was like a biosensor type.
The dog picked up on it, so they were physically there.
It was there. Like you can't see right now, when my dog's literally under my foot. Wherever I go, my dog goes. She's this tiny little thing. Wherever I go, she goes, with like joint at the hip. Yeah. She growled, and I think this is strange. And then I felt them, could see them.
How? Describe, feel them. What did you feel exactly?
I just knew I was not alone.
Felt a presence?
Yeah, I felt a presence. The air was still. I couldn't move. So I was awake. The dog had growled. I couldn't. I'm a Northern England girl. We're a little feisty. You know, no one's going to come and hurt me. I'll hurt, like, we're just not brought up like that, right? And I'm family's from Ireland. We're ready to go, right? And I kind of opened my eyes. The dog's growling. I knew there was a presence in the room. I felt that before in paranormal environments. It was the not being able to move. I was a bit like, okay.
Well, that can be really disturbing to some people to all of a sudden not have function of the body.
Agency over your body, and you've probably noticed during our chat here, I've got ADHD. I struggle to keep still. It's really hard for me to keep still, and I'm really doing my best right now. I couldn't. My eyes were open. I was like, "What the f is this? Oh my god, this thing's here." Okay, you're asleep. You're dreaming. The dog's growling. Yeah, I'm not dreaming. And then I felt them. I felt them. I could see them. But what I was seeing was unbelievable. So I didn't even believe myself. I'm like, am I dead? Like, have I banged my head? Like, am I tripping? Like, whoa. And I felt frightened. I felt decentralized. I felt not right. I was scared.
Did you feel like you were in an altered state, despite the fact that you were meditating? Did you still feel like, even coming out of that, there was an altered state that you were still in?
I felt like I was in suspended animation. Maybe is probably It was just different, and if it hadn't been for the dog, I would have been like, okay, this is a really weird dream. Maybe I'm panicking. Strange. I'm making light of it now, but at the time it was freaking like it was terrifying, right? And then I'm thinking, these blue triangle what? It couldn't make sense of it, but the fear and the being destabilized and the not knowing what was going on and the unbeing able to move. That's a lot for a mind to process at once. And then I felt the lead one.
Describe exactly what you saw first, before you describe what they did. What did they look like when you first laid eyes on them?
This is when.
And where did they appear? And you're inside.
I'm on my bed, and they're around me. They're just around me. I could
very
feel
close to their faces.
They were like here. They were around my entire body, from my feet to my head. There was just a gaggle of these things. And the only way I can describe it is blue triangular things. I knew they had form, but they didn't have form. They were there. We were there. There seemed to be a lead dude.
What was triangular? The shapes of their heads, or what was?
They were not like. I can't even.
So this is something very strange from normal forms that we're used to in terms of life on planet Earth. This is something.
They were not life on planet Earth. I knew I was having an experience with other, and I'm thinking, okay, maybe this is just your turn. You've been messing around with the phenomena. You've been doing all the C5 stuff. You know, I'm very logical and quite rational. So I'm like, okay, la, 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 la. And they were angular, blue triangle things, beings. They had form. They didn't quite have form. They looked a bit grey-ish, alien-ishy, but it was very angular and very blue. It wasn't a bright blue. It was like a glowy blue. And I'm like, I've gone mad. I'm having a stroke.
Was your perception clear? You felt like, in terms of their angular, do you just mean angular features, like maybe a sharp pointed chin?
No.
Or do you mean like something entirely different, very sort of
very abstract? It was like a Matisse, sort of very abstract, but beingy.
But yet, did you feel that like that was their real self, or do you feel like that was a representation in hindsight? Or
I don't know. I don't know. I was too busy thinking, whoa. But when the lead one felt closest to me, I recall that like a very angular like eyes, and I'm thinking, am I trying to project what I think this is? And then the fear and the frightened and the worry like seemed to be taken away. It was taken off me almost like
suddenly,
instantly. And then I got the kind of sense that I needed to stop kind of doing what I was doing. And I took that as the stuff I was doing with C5. That's
that night or all together?
That when that happened to me, I felt that I sound insane, I know.
No,
the message I got was, you need to stop doing what you're doing. And I can only the only thing I was doing in that could have any relevance to this situation is me going out and summoning C5 or dabbling in with unknown, and it just felt like you gotta you're done, it's stopped now. And then I was left with some strange words loudly in my head from the kind of main one. And those words, I have searched every language, every ancient language, from Aramaic to, like, you name it, I've tried to find out what these words mean. And I've never, we don't know what it is. I've never heard it again. I've never seen it again.
Is it pronounceable?
It's not something I would want to really. It's pronounceable to me, because I say it over. It's like a mantra now. It's something I say over and over and over again because I don't know what it is, but I've been left with it for a reason. There's a reason why that phrase, those very clear bang, 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 bang words. Now, it wasn't a mechanical voice. It wasn't a like whoa, scary voice or anything. It was words put into my head.
So it was like syntactic language in your mind. It wasn't like the telepathy that's just an impression. Like you're getting the feeling of what they're talking about, like in kind of general terms. Like there was sort of English language that you could notice in your mind, that kind of telepathy. Okay.
The words were imprinted in my head. I was given those words mind to mind, in a sense, bang, 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 which was altogether different from the sense of you must stop what you're doing. It was the stop what you're doing was like a feeling, and it was like a download. You must stop what you're doing. You understand, stop. But then
there was an energy of warning to it at all?
It's just, you must stop. You must stop.
Not like a vibe of like, we're warning you, you must stop.
No, it wasn't hostile. It was just, you must stop. It must end. No, the words "you must end" were not given. It was the feeling that I must stop.
Or else something was there, the feeling if you didn't stop, something unthinkable would occur.
No, not at all. It was, you must just stop. And then those words were differently implanted into my head. My dog starts growling even more. I get myself together. It's now dark outside and I've lost hours. Gone. There was no marks on my body. I hadn't left the room. You know, the bed covers hadn't been disturbed. The dog was a bit shaky. She'd witnessed something, because she's not a growler. She doesn't growl. She's the nicest little puppy dog ever in the world. And she stuck to me like glue for days after that. I knew she'd felt and seen whatever had happened in that room that night. And then I didn't do C5 or heis for a very, 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 very long time. And even to this day, because I had such success with C5, I'm cautious, very cautious now. But it's very rare for me to really come out of retirement as such. I did in summer with some real great practitioners that have been around doing this since like the late 80s, early 90s. And we had orbs, visitors in the field, but I do it very rarely. And I feel that's because of that night or that day or that event.
Yeah. And when you do it, I mean, is there part of you that's like kind of two minds, whether, because you must be wondering, why did they tell me that? Why not do it? What's the reason?
What's the reason? I last time I did C5, heis. I don't do C5. I do human initiated contact, because I was with some great practitioners, some old school practitioners, it was very private, it was very discreet. There was only like 4 of us. And I trusted and C5 and HICE and contact modalities, a lot of it is around group coherence and intent. What is your intent? And a lot of people go out and do C5, and I don't think they, if this upsets people, fine. It's about intention, and you're out in a field or wherever trying to make contact with God knows what, and without a real clear intention of what you're kind of like dealing with. And I think intent is very big in that. So the last time I did it, the intention was to be very peaceful, non-harmful. But I was still, James, I was still a bit like, and I haven't really done anything since then. And I don't plan on, because I think my direction's a little different now. I'm not the C5 girl that had all the media interest that I had back then. My work now really is with understanding the phenomena, understanding how we can advocate for experiences like myself and yourself, how we can have more dialogue, and how we can self-organize. Gary Nolan said 2-3 years ago, Dr. Gary Nolan, we must self-organize. And I took that really seriously. And, we built a team, and we have self-organized, and we've built a platform that enables people to investigate the unknown together, which is citizen-led. And it's not, no shady government. It's very independent. We've funded it. We've built it. It's ours. It's, a group of experiences that got together to build a platform. And that's where I think my work takes me now. And maybe that's a result of those beings saying, you must stop this stuff, because my work is focused over here now with more citizen science.
Okay. Yeah, possibly. Do you simultaneously entertain other ideas that was psychological operation, to divert you, or did you get a really clear sense of a benevolent intent? What was the sense that you had of their intent and their disposition and quality of energy?
At the time, it was frightening because I'd not experienced anything like that before. But now I look back after, two years or so has gone past, and I believe it was other, whomever, whatever other is. And I believe that it was done to put me on a different track, because the track that I now find myself on enables me to go back to the purpose of communication. Which brings me to a full circle moment. Is that why the orbs reached me as a child, to give me that purpose? I believe I live that purpose now, and maybe I would have never got into this journey of building social science platforms, enabling experiences to connect and create community and understand and investigate the unknown, covering the whole phenomena as well. It's not just UAP and NHI, it's consciousness, it's cryptids, it's the paranormal, it's the occult, it's the ancient history. I'm able to put that all in one place. And maybe that track I'm on now with the platform Nanu, I wouldn't have got there if I'd have been carried on, like airy fairy doing contact work. So I believe it was another purposeful, although really scary at the time and really emotionally affected me. Like, it really affected me for a while. Like, there's probably podcasts with me bursting into tears when I talked about it, but maybe it's why I'm on this track now. So perhaps I'm grateful for it.
I think, practically speaking, there has to be a point where CE5 endeavors kind of run their course, because I don't do CE5 anymore, because I don't have any clear intent or reason to continue going outside and trying to summon, something, because it just doesn't feel like there's any real solid. At a point in time, I had gone through the gang stalking experience and was targeted. And that's when I first began to see CE5. And at that point in time, it was of enormous comfort, that there was something there, that seemed to be concerned about me or associated with me in some kind of way, because I felt completely helpless at that point in time. But as time went on, I mean, I realized that, my intent was sometimes kind of laden with ego, and I just didn't have any just clear reason, to request, citing or anything like that. And I felt like also in my own case, not to get too deep into the weeds here because we have to kind of draw it to a close in a minute or so, but I felt like there was some negative aspects that were incurred from doing CE5 a lot, in terms of a kind of self-consciousness that I kind of didn't like when being outside and not being able to look at the stars without kind of being partially conscious of them, and I felt like they were invested in my progress. The reason why, I guess this you kind of have to explain a little deeper. The reason why is I felt like they were very invested in my spiritual progress. I got that impression from a lot of the sightings. A lot of the sightings that I had happen seemed to have some communication element to them, because they were sometimes timed out, with my thoughts and statements and questions to them. And I struggled for a long time, to get on like the right track, I always felt weirdly like this kind of, and probably mistakenly, this kind of judgment, or just feeling like I just could not meet their expectations, of what they required me to do. And so eventually this kind of self-consciousness developed where I didn't like it. I didn't like the fact that I couldn't go out and just observe the night sky and look at the constellations without kind of that whole world kind of seeming to weigh on me, of my obligations or what I felt at the time.
I get it.
There was certainly a period where, I was probably really confused, as to, what was going on, and maybe still.
Your experience is not something I've not heard before, and your experience is valid, James. And that's why we have to have I think if you're going to do C5, you have to be in a certain intentional state. I always say to anyone, maybe don't do it alone. Group coherence and having a group of people that you trust and you've got a relationship with, and who can share the burden of that experience perhaps with, because you're opening yourself up to so much other. And we as human beings, sometimes we can't onboard that obligation that comes with doing that type of work. And James, it's not for everybody. And what are we summoning? We don't know. And
that was also the thing that started to become more and more apparent, like
let's sing with me.
There was just certain sightings, the timing of certain sightings, which as I say, kind of had this communication element to them that kind of suggested and very unclear, confusing intent by them on their part, as to what they were doing. It just was not at all at any point during that period crystal clear as to why they were doing, what they were doing, and why they were showing up when they were showing up, and what for. And that eventually started to kind of
it'll weigh heavy on you. It weighs heavy, those things. And meditation is a great place to put one's hat when we have these exceptional experiences with other, and we don't quite understand what it means for us. I think the best thing to do is we say look up, but we should also look within, because our consciousness and our relationship with self in some way might be relationship with other. We might all, we're all made of stardust at the end of the day. And, the things you've just described, I do hear from other experiences and obligation, and you start looking at the sky differently, and what is it and how is it? And C5 is not for everybody. It really isn't. And that's okay. That's okay.
Yeah. I think there's a great utility in it. Like the only present day utility that I feel that I might want to conduct CE5 for is to introduce or kind of open up the minds of people who are closed off to the possibility of the phenomenon, who don't believe in aliens, or are still on the fence, and are not sure, whether this is happening or not. I think if, you can take people out and show them, firsthand, tangibly, something in the sky that is clearly unconventional. There's a great utility in that. But
there is, but it comes at a cost.
Yeah.
It's no cost.
It comes at a cost. It's definitely going to create a different outcome, for that person, a different trajectory, which I think, is probably likely to be more positive, but it's not guaranteed, I think people who are really still wrapped up in ego probably aren't going to benefit much, possibly, from CE5 sightings. They're going to wrap that up in their identity and narrative. And just be merely kind of deriving egoic kind of satisfaction from having that happen, and being someone. I'm someone who's seen aliens before or seen a craft before. I'm sure that's the case with some people. But I think in general, it would seem to be mostly positive, to kind of shatter or to really kind of disrupt the worldview,
No, I got it. I do get it, and I think everything has its place, and I feel that we all have potentially different roles within the topic and the culture, and the on board into the proposition that we're not alone. And some of us find our purposes within that. For me, CE5 is not where my purpose lies anymore. I am grateful of some of the experiences. I am grateful that I have an ability to perform that, shall we say. But this part of my life is there isn't much room for heist. Does that stop me from lying in our family farm in North Wales with the most crystal clear skies, with very little light pollution, and looking up and seeing incredible things? No. But the very act of just going out and summoning and doing all of that jazz it's just not for me, because anymore. It's not to say it might change in the future, but it's not where my purpose lies. And for me, as someone in this community, and my purpose lies somewhere else. And that's the track I believe I was kind of placed on after that startling experience I had with the different type of beings. I've not seen them again. They've not come back.
I haven't.
No, it's maybe they will, maybe they won't. Would I like that to happen? Maybe it'll be the next train, next track onto something else. And the investigation of the unknown is where I'm at, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to be able to investigate the unknown and use citizen science and build platforms and form community to look at what I believe humanity's greatest thing right now is we are not alone, and how we.
It's the most important story.
It is the most important story and thing's not even the right word, but you get my sentiments. What a time to be alive! What a time to be alive! And I'm excited, and I'm nervous, and I'm energized, and I worry, and I have all of the human emotions about this. But it's an interesting time to be alive, and yeah, that's where we are.
Yeah. And this was an interesting conversation. It was so interesting that I really feel like we have to do this again. I just feel
Absolutely.
like it's very substantive and enjoyable. And I think you have a lot of information that we could
Thank you.
go over. And so, we should set up another podcast at some point.
Let's do it.
Any final thing that you would like to say as far as an important message or that we could close out with?
I think we're in a very interesting point in our human journey, and investigating in the unknown is really important. And if people want to have the tools to explore that, they should definitely come and check out my new app, which is called Nanu, which is Networking Advancing New Understandings, which is completely free to use and download, available on App Store and on Android, available in 4 languages across 170 countries. And it enables people to discuss, discover, and hopefully disclose this phenomenal topic that clearly we're both very interested in as experiences. And, my closing statement will always be experiencer voices matter and people matter. And we should unite and clasp hands as a community a little bit more than we do.
Absolutely. Well, beautifully said. And yes, we will do this again. And thanks for coming on. This was just a wonderful conversation.
Thank you.
And thanks everyone who watched. And we do this podcast every Monday at 8 p.m. EST. And thanks everyone. And have a good night and take care.
Thank you for tuning in with us tonight. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and follow to receive notifications when new content is made available. A Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure is looking to talk with ufologists, researchers, investigators, contactees, abductees, channelers, and more for upcoming shows. Or if you have stories, photos, videos, questions, suggestions, or comments, please contact us through Messenger or email us at paranomalypodcast@gmail.com. And you can also visit us at paranomalypodcast.com for more content and information, including all our social links. I thank you again for watching or listening, and we hope to see you on the next episode of Paranomaly Beyond Disclosure.